For our last video in Chapter 15, we want to talk about sort of the similarities and differences between consumption and investment and the role that expectations play. I think the most important thing to remember is that investment is all about the future, right? Investment is all about making sure you have enough physical capital in order to meet future demand. Consumption is about meeting current needs, right? So consumption is everything from making sure you have enough food to eat and shelter and clothing. And then some things that are more flexible, things like entertainment spending, vacation spending. But a lot of consumption is not that flexible, right? A lot of consumption kind of needs to happen. And so what we'll see is that investment tends to be much more volatile than consumption. And one of the reasons that that's true, right, is that investment depends not only on expected future profit, but also on current profit. And so in times when current profit is low, then we tend to see less current investment, and an investment might fall substantially, right? And whereas with consumption, as we'll see, yeah, you can cut back on some things, but some things you just can't cut back on, and so consumption tends to be much less volatile. So we can think of investment as both a function of the discounted value of total profits, or what we call profitability, but also on the current level of profits. And then profit per unit of capital would be an increasing function of output to the capital stock, meaning just how productive is the capital stock. The more productive it is, the more profits you will have. And that seems to be true, right? So we have change in output on the left hand axis in blue, and the change in the ratio of profit to capital on the right axis in red. And they do tend to move up and down pretty closely, right? So the more profitable capital is, the more output we have. So if we think about consumption and investment, the similarities are that we have to take into account expectations for both consumption and investment. Also, we can think about that, current income is going to be important for a large number of consumers, right, who either are credit constrained, so they can't borrow, or they are sort of less far-looking than other consumers. And similarly with businesses, the more profits they have, the more cash on hand they're going to have, the easier it will be to invest, and vice versa. So when profits are low and cash is tight, they're much less likely to invest, buying new machines or building new factories or whatever. But the difference is that, a business can survive without investing for a certain amount of time, right? Whether that's a year or 2 years or 3 years, whereas a consumer can't survive without consuming, right? A consumer will need to consume at least some base level in order to survive and make it to the next year, whereas a firm can always rely on its existing capital stock. Even if that's depreciating, they can either just replace the depreciation, or even, maybe not replace it and plan on replacing it in the future. So if we look at sort of consumption and investment, we can see, so investment here this is the deviation of percent growth in investment from its mean, so like how much it goes up and down. So investment's in red and consumption is in blue. And you can see that investment goes up and down a lot, right? It goes way down in recessions, it booms up in booms, whereas consumer spending, yeah, it tends to be a little bit higher in expansions and a little bit lower in recessions, but, at a much smaller fraction. And the interesting thing is that consumption is actually a much larger piece of GDP than investment, but because investment goes up and down so much more, that the actual, contribution to recessions and expansions is approximately the same. So a small movement in consumption is equal to a big movement in investment.